This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. In this new series, I talk to coaches, leaders and experts who share their passion for this incredible profession and their knowledge of how to do marketing well. Our ambition is to contribute to the development of the coaching profession and to bring you some new ideas, insights and strategies so you can create an impact with your coaching and marketing. Hello and welcome to the third episode in the Make Time for Your Marketing podcast series. Today we're going to shake things up a little bit and talk about creating powerful habits and also a little bit about how your sales mindset and how sales might fit into your marketing game plan. We're also going to look a little bit about how we make decisions and the time management side of our lives as coaches and how we can approach marketing in a more strategic and holistic way. On the podcast today, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Jeremy Lazarus. Jeremy, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have you on the show. So before we get stuck into things, I'd love to get your take on what you believe marketing is and where marketing fits into our lives as coaches.
Okay, so the first thing to say is I'm not an expert in marketing. Having said that, I've run my own coaching business for 23 years. For me, I think marketing is everything you do so that you can have sales conversations with prospective clients. So it leads into selling. You could be the best salesperson on the planet, but if you've got no one to sell to because there's no marketing, then it's not particularly helpful.
And I'd love to tap into some of your expertise about selling and sales today. So we'll get stuck into that later on. Before we get into our conversation today, I'd love to give our listener a little bit of more of a sense of who you are, Jeremy, and your background. You've got a wealth of experience, I know, with a corporate and a finance background and as a coach. So perhaps if you could fill in some of the gaps for us and tell our listener a little bit more about how you ended up doing what it is that you do today.
Sure. So it's quite an unusual journey. I actually spent 18 years in the world of finance. I'm a qualified accountant and a qualified corporate treasurer. And I had 18 years in finance roles in the city, in a management consultancy, all sorts of organizations. And it's a long story. But in 1999, I quit my job. Why? Because I wanted to make a difference, which is probably not what most accountants would say. What I found, the higher up I went in organizations, I was asked to disrespect people. And that just didn't fit with my values. I think the financial figures in any organization are a reflection of the people. If you get the people right, then the numbers tend to flow. So in 1999, I quit my job, set up my own coaching business, and I also I'm a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming. In fact, I'm a master trainer of NLP. And since that point, since 1999, I've been coaching and training all sorts of people, public sector, private sector, big companies, small companies, elite athletes, trade unions, charities, so all sorts. And I'm blessed that I do what I love and love what I do.
I'm curious, how did you discover coaching back in 1999?
If I roll the clock back a year and a half previously, I attended a personal development course. I was dragged kicking and screaming into it. And I loved it. And on the course, we received coaching. And in some of these sort of, I suppose, group exercises, we were coaching other people. And I found I just loved it. And people said I was good at it. I didn't necessarily believe them at the time, but I loved it. And it's a long story. But a year and a half later, I quit my job because, one, I knew I didn't want to carry on with finance. And secondly, I just loved coaching that much. So I just went into it.
Yeah. Let's tap into your background there. You mentioned NLP, and there's going to be a lot of listeners here that are familiar with NLP, but I realise too that there's going to be some new listeners that perhaps have no idea what you mean by NLP, but I believe that NLP could be an important part of our conversation today, actually, in the context of how we approach marketing. So maybe if you could give our listener a very quick introduction as to what NLP is, and maybe then some thoughts in terms of how we can use NLP to how we think about our marketing.
So neuro-linguistic programming, the language of the mind, the neuro-linguistic, to change the programs or the patterns of behavior that we have. And I think of it as a series of tools and techniques which have got three main benefits. One, it helps people to communicate more effectively. So selling, for example, and marketing is an example of communication. We need to be able to communicate effectively. NLP's got some tools that can help us do that. Secondly, NLP can help. It's got a series of techniques that can help us to change the way we think about situations. So, for example, when I work with my athletes, if they're nervous before a cup final or a tennis match, whatever, NLP can help them, there's techniques that can help them to change the way they think. In terms of sales and marketing, if someone, and we'll talk about this a bit later, if a coach, for example, has a limiting belief, a belief about marketing or a belief about selling that is not helpful to them, then NLP will have a series of techniques that can help people to change their limiting beliefs. So we've got communication, limiting beliefs, and the third aspect of NLP is it helps people to replicate excellence. So, for example, if someone is a brilliant marketeer, how do they do that? How do they think? What do they do? And using NLP, we can ask questions that can help get inside the head of people who are excellent at what they do, so we can then replicate that for ourselves. So I think that's, in a summary, the benefits of NLP and what it's about.
That's a great summary, Jeremy. And there's some really good stuff to get stuck into there. So let's do that. So you mentioned their limiting beliefs. So where do you, in your experience, see many coaches, I wouldn't just say struggle with their marketing, but struggle with their business? Where do you see folks getting stuck with that stuff?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. One is in the idea of selling. The idea that for some people, selling in inverted commas is some kind of dirty word. It's some kind of manipulation or getting someone to do something they don't want to do. And I don't perceive it that way. I think selling actually is serving. So, for example, Bob, if you're looking to buy a pair of shoes and you go into a shoe shop and the salesperson asks you what you wanted, what you're looking for in a pair of shoes, and you tell them what they're looking for, and they have that in stock, it's almost rude of them not to sell it to you. So they're serving you by giving you what you want and what you need. So I think selling is about serving, and it's not a dirty word. I think also linked to that, money, the idea of money. For some people, certainly some coaches, money again is a dirty word. And through, I guess, my background in finance, plus the work I do as a coach, I think there's five reasons why people don't have enough money, don't have the sort of money they want. And perhaps we can cover that later. I'm sure some of the listeners will be interested in that.
Well, I'd be interested in that right now. So let's share those if you've got them to hand.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, great.
All right. So the first, so there's five. They're probably falling into two categories. One is more sort of emotional type or psychological, and the other one is more about knowledge and cognitive. So let's take the first category first. There are three in that category. One is lack of motivation. The reason some people don't have enough money is it's just not important enough to them. Simple as that. And what I would say to people, and I've run some courses around this, is to make a list of at least 20, 50 reasons why it would be useful for you and other people for you to have money. So that's what one aspect to be clear why, and it's not, I'm not talking about buying flash cars or stuff like that, but what difference it makes to your kids if they, in their education, for example, or if your kids see their parents are progressing in it and can give them the kind of lifestyle they want. So motivation is the first one, or values. The second one is what we've touched on, this limiting beliefs. Money's dirty. People who have got money are bad in some way, or have to cheat or lie to have money, or money's the root of all evil, that kind of stuff. And I consider those limiting beliefs. The third one is what we call in NLP negative emotions, in inverted commas negative. Things like, well, typically the negative emotions would be things like anger, sadness, fear, and guilt. Particularly when it comes to money, fear of money, guilt about having it, guilt about not having it. So if you're guilty about the thought of having money, chances are you may feel disempowered about asking for money and having money. So motivation, limiting beliefs, negative emotions. And those are, as I say, more sort of psychological or emotional.
Yeah.
The two, you okay with this so far?
Great. Yeah, this is great, Jeremy.
The other two, the first one links to marketing, actually, not having enough knowledge about how to make money.
Right.
And marketing fits into that category clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the final one is what to do with the money that you've got. So how do you spend it? How do you, saving, investments, etc. A lot of people, they blow their money on stuff which are consumables or on things that they think are assets, but which actually depreciate. I'm going to put my counters on just for a moment, whereas it's more sensible to buy assets that appreciate.
I'm curious now, and I want to tap into your expertise with finances here. because I understand a little bit of this stuff, but I think it would be a great thing to share with our listener here in terms of the difference between assets and liabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And also perhaps this may tap in, I don't know, I'm sort of exploring it with you, Jeremy, the relationship that we have perhaps to things like selling and marketing, but marketing more specifically, because one thing that I know comes up a lot with those that I work with is whether they see marketing as an investment or as a cost.
Ooh,
yeah.
Interesting question.
So let's get into that, but I'd love to get into that first bit first. It may be that our listener doesn't know the difference between an asset and a liability. And to your point there, they might be investing, they think they're investing their money, but they're actually buying assets, which are liabilities, for example.
Okay. So the first thing I have to say is that whatever I tell you on this podcast is not investment advice. I have to say that. I'm not giving advice to it. I'm hopefully just giving information, just to be clear on that. So the accountant's version of an asset is anything that you can sell to make money, that will give you money. So a car, for example, if a company has got a car or has got a building or has got a computer, that would be classed as an asset and something they can sell to get some kind of money. Whereas a liability is something they owe to someone else, money they owe. People, though, it could be trade creditors, it could be the tax, to the HMRC. Those are examples of liabilities. I think from a more, if you take accountancy out of it and look at it in a more general sense, I think if you take a car, for example, if someone has a car, on one hand, yes, of course, it's an asset, you could sell it. But actually, a big car drinks a lot of petrol, costs a lot to insure, and it depreciates in value. So although accountants would call that an asset, actually, you could consider that as a liability because generally it's something that depreciates in value and is going to cost you money year on year on year. Whereas the assets which yield some kind of cash, things like stocks and shares, property generally, long term, generally property, generally stocks and shares do appreciate in value and you get dividends or rental income, then those would be what I would consider assets and the sort of investment vehicles to put your money into longer term. And I say that is just an opinion. It's not advice. Does that answer your question there, Rob, from that point of view?
I think so, yeah. And how would that translate to our relationship towards marketing, perhaps, and the things that we would do in our business? So that might be training as well. What sort of mindset can we adopt from that point of view to help ourselves going forward?
Accountants would see things like training and marketing as an expense. It's money that goes out and it goes against the revenue you get and it reduces the profit if you look at the profit and loss account in any given period. I think a business person would say that marketing expenditure, if it's done in the right way, and I'm sure you've got lots of other experts and in this series you can advise what the right way is. If marketing expenditure is spent in a productive way, then that actually is an investment because you spend money now and you get money in the future. And that's the investment side of it. Similarly with training. So, for example, okay, we're speaking about coaches. Most coaches will invest, I say as investment, invest in training courses to become an effective coach so that they can coach more effectively, get more referrals, charge higher fees because they're more effective. So I would see training as an investment. Now, of course, as someone who runs training courses, I would say that, wouldn't I? And I genuinely believe it. I've invested a lot of money over the years in my own development because I can see the benefits of it.
Let's get into that side of things. You mentioned your training there, and I know you talk a lot about sales and selling in your training there. I'm curious as to how you see the relationship between sales and marketing and what we can learn from maybe the sales process, or what can we learn from what we know about selling or what you know about selling, Jeremy, and how that can inform our marketing.
I think there's a few things. So as I mentioned earlier, I think marketing is what happens before we can have the sales conversations. So if I talk briefly about the process, a sales process, I'm not saying the sales process, but a sales process, and then we'll link it back to marketing. So you've done your marketing, you get a meeting with someone. So whether it's face-to-face, on Zoom, on the phone, whatever it is, you get someone who's interested in what you offer. What you're offering. You would in some way build some kind of rapport with them, perhaps some credibility with them so they know, like, and trust you. I think a really important point of selling is In NLP, we call it values elicitation. In English, that's finding out what somebody wants. So the example of the shoes before, an effective shoe salesperson would ask you, Rob, what are you looking for in a pair of shoes? What do you want? What's important to you in a pair of shoes? So there's a process to find out what the client or prospect actually wants.
Yeah.
On the assumption that what you have as a coach, for example, can meet the needs of your prospective clients. Then I go back to what I said before, it's not selling, it's serving. So demonstrate how what you have, or your experience, your credentials, what your knowledge, what you have to offer can help meet your prospects' needs. Once you've done that, there'll be some inverted commas objections. You've got to handle those. That's the next step in the process, to handle the objections, and then ask for the business. And I think a lot of people, from my understanding, don't actually ask for the business, which could, of course, link back to limiting beliefs about money and selling and all of that. If what you offer is going to serve someone, it's rude not to sell to them.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a sales process that I think is really useful on the back of effective marketing. Now, in terms of how that links back into marketing, you asked, what are some of the things we could learn from selling and use in our marketing? I think things like building rapport. So and building credibility. So demonstrating in your marketing, it could be your podcast, could be blogs, could be videos, could be networking meetings, whatever. Demonstrate that you understand the issues that your target market is facing. I think that, and you can, in your marketing, pre-handle some of the likely objections. So if you know the sort of objections, could be around time, could be around money, whatever it may be, you can pre-handle those in some of your marketing. So, for example, if a classic one is, I don't have time for this, well, you can give examples of how your coaching has saved people time. If another example is money, you can use example of how people have hit their sales targets, they got promoted faster than they otherwise would without your coaching. It's just making sense.
Yeah, it's great. I really like that in terms of particularly what you were saying there about the objections. You see sometimes in good marketing, those objections being addressed. And I can see how that can fit into what you're describing there in terms of developing rapport and a relationship with a potential buyer or somebody who's going to invest in your services.
Because I also think that if someone reading your article, or you're listening to someone's or reading someone's blog, if they're thinking, oh, I don't have time, then, or don't have the money for this, they may not then get in touch with you. Whereas if you pre-answer those questions, they're more likely to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I love that. Can you think of any examples, not necessarily specifics, but times or people or organizations even that you have seen, particularly coaches, if you can think of those, that do this stuff really well, and maybe what some of the attributes are of those folks?
So I don't want to mention names, but I have seen coaches over the years who have been very good marketeers. And I think, well, I've perceived that they're good marketers. I'm not, as I said, I'm not a brilliant marketer myself, but it seemed to me that they were good marketeers. They had a lot of confidence in their ability, and they wanted to let people know about what they offered. They networked a lot. Certainly, this is a model that was very useful sort of 15, 20 years ago when I was in my fairly early stages. I think now there are a lot more marketing is done online. So people, as far as I can see, they build a funnel. So they get people into a funnel, and then they start they're sending them emails, and I'm sure other speakers will talk about the marketing funnel. So there's some people who are really effective at knowing who their market is. In fact, one of my marketing coaches, someone who's coached me around marketing, said, you'd find a niche that's an inch wide and a mile deep. In other words, it's a very narrow focus, but there's a lot of people in it. And then get to know them and market to them, speak their language, basically.
You mentioned their coaching ability, and I wonder about how much, and that being a trait of coaches that are marketing themselves well. I'm curious to learn from your point of view, Jeremy, how much of that plays a part in our confidence when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays quite a quite a big part. So having said that, I don't consider myself an expert in marketing. I've been in business for 23 years.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm doing something right. and most of my marketing has come from word of mouth.
Yeah.
And doing talks like this, for example. So hopefully, firstly, the referrals are referring people to me because of my hopefully, it's hard for me to say this, it sounds a bit arrogant, it's not meant to. Hopefully I've got a degree of competence, both as a trainer or as a coach, that would encourage people to talk about this. And it's the same with all the listeners. So get good at coaching.
Yeah.
Learn, get as good as you can, and recognize that even as a novice, even the most successful expert coach was a novice at some point. So even if you're just starting out on your journey, remember that you, with coaching skills, can help your clients to move forward and achieve their goals faster than they would do without you. And so my tip, again, this is psychological. It's something I've seen with various people. Resist any temptation to compare yourself to experts. Compare yourself to yourself, and to where you are. So if you're learning as a coach and you're progressing, and can you help your clients? If you can help your clients, if you've got skills that can help them, doesn't matter that someone else could do it even better or faster than you. What do you offer, and what can you offer that can help your clients? So I think if you have your focus on your clients and your prospects, and recognizing the skills that you have, even as a inverted commas novice coach, that will help you.
That's great. There's some really great counsel there. Thanks, Jeremy, in terms of our approach and thinking about how we should be thinking about ourselves as coaches as well there. I'm curious, with the folks that you train and have the opportunity to encounter through all the training that you do, what else do you see them getting stuck with? Not just the marketing side of things, but also, wrapping their coaching up in a business context as well. Where do they get a bit stuck there, do you see?
There's a few things. Sometimes it's around, I think, time management is an important factor. I think we alluded to this earlier in prioritization. So it's how much time would someone ideally spend marketing and networking? How much time would someone ideally spend learning and developing themselves? How much time would someone ideally spend doing their coaching? And I think this is sometimes exacerbated if someone is employed in a role and they're looking to develop their coaching part-time. So they're doing it sort of Monday to Friday, 9 till 5 as a manager in an organization, and they want to do coaching outside of that. How do they find the time? And what are they going to focus on? So I think that's an important point as well. And sometimes, and it alludes to what I've said before, sometimes coaches are so focused on themselves, they forget about their prospective clients.
Yeah.
Am I good enough? Can I coach? Who am I? As opposed to there's thousands of people out there who could benefit from my services. And most coaches go into coaching because they want to help others. And paradoxically, they kind of get stuck in themselves. Have your focus on your prospects and your clients.
That's a great tip there, right there, Jeremy. Thinking about getting outside of our own heads and just thinking about who it is that we serve and what we could be doing to support them, and then looking at things from that angle. And I think that very much does apply to our marketing as well. It's not about so much who I am and what I can offer. It's also about who can I serve and what are the challenges that they are experiencing, and talking about that rather than talking about perhaps my own skills or something like that.
In my experience, if we as coaches can have our attention on our clients all the time and think, how can we serve them? That is going to make the biggest difference, because even if we're novices, somebody once said to me, in fact, in my very early days as a coach, one of my mentors, who was and still is a very successful coach, said, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, or the one-eyed person is king. So if we know a little bit more than our prospective clients, if we can help them to go through the maze of their problems, then they will compensate us. If we can help people solve their problems, we are massively valuable. If we can help them achieve their goals faster than they would themselves, we become massively valuable.
You touched upon time management and prioritization earlier. I'd love to know from your experience, both through your training, but also for you personally and professionally, how you manage your own time perhaps, and prioritization. And you've been in business a long time. You wouldn't be in business for 23 years if you couldn't prioritize and manage your time in an effective way. So I'd love to know some tips or ideas or thoughts or things that have worked well for you, Jeremy, that we could perhaps share with our listener today that might support them in terms of, my guess would be that for many, very overwhelmed, I haven't got time to do this, learn about marketing, do the marketing and all the other stuff that I need to do to run a coaching business, particularly when I'm trying to find clients, keep clients, work with clients. What have you learned that could be useful?
Okay. So I'm going to speak very quickly because there's so much I could say about this. And I would say also that if people go to my website, there's a blog and a video, a 10-minute, 15-minute video, which covers a technique for time management and some tips that I take most of my executive coaching clients through. I'll summarize it here. So let's take the context of work. So what I ask a client to do is to list all the categories of things they do during a working week: meetings, emails, facing clients, whatever. So there'll be a list of activities, if you like. And then next to that, there'll be 4 columns. First column is, how do they currently spend their time? So how many hours a week do they currently spend on each of these activities? Okay. And then the next column is, in an ideal, realistic world, how much time would they spend on each of these activities? So putting on a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet, it really kind of gets in black and white. The next column is what are the pluses and minuses. So what do they need to do less of and what do they need to do more of? And then the final column is some actions. And sometimes even just addressing a small thing, even 1 hour a week, for example, 1 extra hour a week on marketing could have a massive impact on results. So it's not necessarily the big numbers that you'd address. Sometimes it's the small numbers, half an hour more of this, an hour less on that can make the big difference. But you look at it overall and you decide what things to do more of and less of, what actions to take. And to put that into context, one of my clients years ago, who was a chief exec actually, of an entertainment business. And a lot of his company's profits related to 5 particular activities. And I said, how much of your profits depend on that? He said something like 70%. So 70% of the company's profits on 5 activities. I said to him, how much time are you spending on that? He said, about 25%. I said, how much time would you ideally spend? He said 45%. So there and then, that helped me to suss out, actually, well, okay, if you're going to spend 20% more time, you're going to have to do less of something else. And for 2 consecutive years, his companies had record profits. I'm not saying it's a direct result of that, but I think it probably helped. So that kind of led me to think about how to structure time management in that way. So that's one thing about how I've helped other people to do it. And it's a tip, I urge all coaches to at least be aware of this approach, because certainly nowadays, most people are short of time. In terms of some of the things you asked about me personally, I think it's asking myself, what's going to get me to where I want to get to work-wise, business-wise.
Yeah. So it's about being strategic.
Yeah.
I love what you said there about actually just 1 hour a week, for example, could make a big difference. That ties in with what you were just saying there about what's going to get you to where you want to get next, I suppose. And it's about knowing what to focus on next and sort of having that sort of cold, hard objectivity, I suppose. Have you got any thoughts or ideas about how we can develop or cultivate that habit and train ourselves to be a little bit more, I suppose, business-like or a bit more objective in terms of, making those better decisions or making sure that we're focused on the right thing rather than the thing we want to be doing, but we ought to be doing, because that's the thing that's really going to take us to the next level?
Well, I'm smiling as you ask that question. The first thing that comes to mind is get a coach.
Yes, of course.
Or have a buddy or a mentor that holds you to account. But I think beyond that, I think it's about having a very clear vision about where you want to get to and a purpose for what you're doing. So to have a 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, 50-year vision.
Wow.
About where you want to get to, the difference you want to make. And, when you eventually retire or eventually die, to be what would have happened, so that you can look back at your retirement or even on your your deathbed and look back and think, wow, I've made my mark. I've achieved what I want. I've done what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And I think building, often people create the future from the present. Well, if you create the future from the future, go into the future in your mind and be there. And that can help you get clear on what your mission, your purpose are, and then bring it back to the present and say, okay, what's my next year? What's the 12-month plan, for example, that's going to get me on track for that 20-year vision? And then to start focusing on that. And I think you used the point earlier, Rob, about being ruthless with time. There are so many demands on people's time now.
Yeah.
So it's about being really clear and being willing to say no as well.
Yeah.
And again, that in terms of limiting beliefs, I know some coaches, I mean, pretty much all coaches, we're doing this because we've got a big heart. We want to make a difference. And sometimes that can spill over into, oh, let me rescue you, or I can't say no to you because, you need my help. Well, sometimes we need to say no, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be focused on what it is that we're here to do. And then link to that things like delegation. So I know people who outsource their marketing, outsource their accounting. I mean, as an ex-accountant, the first couple of years, I did all my accounting. What a waste of time.
Yeah.
Get someone else to do it and let me spend my time on stuff that's in line with my business. So I'm saying to the listeners, delegate. There's plenty of bookkeepers, virtual assistants out there, marketing expertise. Yeah, you use that and focus on what you and only you can do.
There's some great guidance there, Jeremy. And I'm curious to know how you managed to let go of the accounting side of your business, because I know when you're good at something, and I can imagine you being sort of like wanting to hold on to that.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, because I see so many people when they're very good at something, it's the last thing that they will actually outsource or delegate.
Yeah, and this is with hindsight. So I'm being 20/20 hindsight.
Okay,
obviously.
benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was just stopping and just thinking. I won't use swear words. What I actually said to myself, but what on earth are you doing?
Yeah.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Right. Yeah.
Just because I can do my books doesn't mean I should do it. And what am I here to do? And it's better to pay someone a few quid an hour to do my bookkeeping, so that I can then work with my clients. So that's what I say to people listening: be ruthless, step back, have a look at make actually. One of the things I do, I guess it's a hangover from all those years being a management consultant in the world of accountants, is I keep a timesheet. I keep my own timesheet every single day. I make a list of how I've spent my time.
Wow. Yeah.
And I look at, I won't use the exact words because, again, it's people listening, I don't want to offend them. But what on earth are you doing spending so much time on admin?
Yeah.
Or finance? Jeremy, what are you doing? So I would urge people, the coaches listening, to keep their own timesheet. Just 10 minutes a day, because I think, many would argue our time is one of our biggest, if not our biggest asset, apart from our knowledge. And if we misuse our time, then we're not serving as many people as we can do.
Yeah. That's a great way to think of it that way. Ties in to a point that you made earlier about not thinking about ourselves, but thinking about those that we serve. Yeah. And actually, we're shortchanging those people we already work with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if we do spend time on what only we can do, we're going to serve more people.
Yeah.
And we'll feel better about that. The other thing is, I feel a lot better coaching than doing my books.
Yes.
So it's also, if we think about it, exactly. It's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think there's in terms of finding the motivation to be more ruthless, I think that's really good. That's a really inspiring thought and idea I haven't come across yet, Jeremy, which is to almost think of, two thoughts, actually. The first thing is, I imagine that was maintaining that habit that's hung over from sort of corporate days for you has probably revealed some powerful insights. I always get a sense that what we think we're doing versus what we're actually doing can be two different things. So I can imagine how those numbers, when you saw them, just went, hang on a minute, I thought I was doing this much admin, but I'm doing this much admin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then to think of that in the context of, well, there are more people I could be serving, but by doing this much admin, I'm now not doing that, I think is a great way to think of how we could perhaps take a fresh perspective in terms of what it is we do and how we practically do it. But I also loved your earlier idea too about, just how that 1 hour a week, for example, could make a difference too.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I can just go back to what you said, if I put my accountant's hat on for a moment, if you can get someone, let's say, pay them £20 an hour, let's say, to do bookkeeping or virtual assistant, for example. If you can charge yourself out, if you do charge yourself out, let's say at £100 an hour as a coach, and even if you're not, I know you won't necessarily work 100% of the time, you can do the maths and see actually it makes pure business sense to delegate out the relatively low value tasks.
Yeah.
And to people who are really good at it.
Yeah.
And who want to do it. So you can do the stuff that you're good at and you want to do, like coaching.
Yeah. So it's about looking at those low value tasks there and also looking at ways you could sort of leverage your time in a much more effective way. Jeremy, that's been amazing, and I can't believe how quickly the time is going here. And there's a tremendous amount that we've covered and so much more I'd love to cover with you. I'm curious to know, from everything that you've experienced, both in the corporate days and also in the last 23 years as a coach, there's obviously some tremendous opportunities these days from a digital perspective, as you were touching upon earlier, now that we're doing a lot more online. But I imagine there are some principles and things that have always stood the test of time and are still good values to have today in business. I'm curious, from your point of view, what's working really well and what's worked very well for you over the years from developing and maintaining relationships with your own clients and customers?
I think it's finding out what they want and delivering it. In my opinion, if we deliver what our clients and prospects want, then all things being equal, they'll come back, repeat business, and they're likely to refer you. And it doesn't matter whether I think it's always been the case. It's the way to do business. When I was 13, I started cleaning people's cars, and I got word of mouth, and sometimes I just knocked on people's doors, and if their car was dirty, and I remember one woman, she said, I told her what I charged, she said, I could do that myself. I said, okay. And then I came back 2 weeks later, and she hadn't done it. And I said, listen, let me clean your car. If you're not happy with it, don't pay me.
Yeah.
And I did that for 8 years while I was at college and everything. So it's just the principles, whether you're cleaning cars, whether you're coaching people, whatever it is, satisfy your customer.
That's great.
I'm almost embarrassed to say it. It's so obvious. But I really think it's that way. Find out what people want, what your customers want, and give it to them.
Yeah, I love how in a world which is full of information about how to do things these days, in a world that's seemingly complex, it can come down to some very simple principles and sort of grounding ourselves in those. So I love that. And I love that story there that you kindly shared with us about actually how to develop, a really good customer. So that's great. I'm just curious, Jeremy, a little bit more about the work that you do and where you're going. You're also an author. I know that. And I'm curious as to what's next for you and whether you've also got some resources on your website. So I'll ask you about those details in a minute so our listener can find out more about you. But yeah, what are you working on at the moment? What's next for you?
Okay, so this is quite personal. So my life tends to go in 20-year cycles.
Right.
And I'm starting another 20-year cycle. A few years ago, my father died, and we've had obviously various upheavals globally, pandemics, whatever. So I've been reassessing. And I think for me, I still love what I do. I love coaching. I love training. And I want to do more of that training. NLP, training coaches, supervising coaches. I've been a coaching supervisor. I will write another book because that's part of my legacy. And I think it's the L word, the legacy. Again, a very personal story. So my dad died 3 years ago, and I don't have children. And I promised my dad on his deathbed that the Lazarus name would continue. He kept saying to me for years, Lazarus has been in this country for 200 years in this particular lineage. And so I want the name Lazarus to continue through my work. So it'll be books, it'll be coaching and training, and it's not about the Lazarus name; it's the impact. So I want to make coach and train as many people as possible, and make the biggest impact on this planet. So that's what I'm about.
That's great, Jeremy. Thanks for sharing that with us. So for our listener, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you directly? And also, where can they find out more about what you do and some of those resources that you kindly mentioned earlier?
So I'm fortunate I have one of these names that aren't too many of us. So if people Google Jeremy Lazarus, Coach London, there's probably only going to be, I'll probably be at the top. But it's the website is obviously www.thelazarus. So my company's called The Lazarus Consultancy. The website is The Lazarus. That's lazarus.com. So they go to that website. If they go into the free stuff and the blogs, there's a load of stuff there that people can look at. They'll see the coaching courses, the credentialed courses. So I offer coaching qualifications with the AC and other organisations, NLP training that's recognised by UK University, and obviously one-to-one coaching and leadership development as well. So they can go on the website to see that. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not too big on Facebook and Twitter because I think I'm offering my market's more professional. So I guess LinkedIn rather than sort of consumer, so to speak, business to business rather than business to consumer. Go onto Amazon. There's my books. I will be writing at least one or two more. The next one is going to be The Mindset for Success.
Ah, so that's very relevant to our conversation.
I'm not sure when that's going to be out, but it's very relevant. Absolutely. I think if there's one thing that makes the biggest difference for people, it's the mentality they have. Doesn't matter what your background is. If you've got the right mentality, if you're made of the right stuff, you can make your dreams come true.
That's fantastic. And on that note, Jeremy, have you got any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us in the context of our conversation today?
Well, I'm not going to repeat everything I've said. I think the key takeaways, I think, be clear on what you're about, be clear on your purpose, what you want to do. Look inside if you have limiting beliefs, if there are things about you that stop you from doing and having what you want to be, do and have, find yourself a coach. Work on it so that we, as the coaching profession, can make the biggest impact on this planet. And have coaching being a profession that people, it's not seen as some kind of a luxury, that it's almost like it's not obvious, why wouldn't you have a coach? So that's it.
That's great. Super stuff. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jeremy.
My pleasure, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I'm Rob Lawrence. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and societies worldwide. To find out more about the Association for Coaching and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our website at associationforcoaching.com. You can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.